I remember my dad looking at me. I was in a really bad relationship, and I remember one time he looked me in the eyes and he just said, he almost had tears. Like he wasn't crying, but he was really close. He said, "Meagan, this is not who you are." And that spoke so loud to my heart and to my mind. And I mean, it was probably a good 6 months. I remember in the moment, feeling it, I felt it. But on the outside, I was like, okay. Kind of the eye roll, you don't know me.
Welcome to Think Better Together, a mental health podcast brought to you by mindsconnected.com.
Meagan, I am so glad that you got to hang out with me today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is huge honor. Just love and respect you so much. So this is fun. I'm excited.
Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on in your life right now?
Yep. So I am married to my husband, Jordan. We've been married for almost 8 years,
Nice.
which seems crazy because I'm like, we just graduated high school. How have we been married for 8 years? But we've been dating for almost 12, which is crazy.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the line where we've been together longer than we haven't, which is really fun. We have 3 beautiful kids, actually. Well, we're not sure on the last one. That one's still cooking.
Okay.
It's still in my belly. I'm sure he or she will be very good.
Thank you for sharing your family with us. And I'd actually like to talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just kind of work our way there. If we could start with your childhood and just tell me where you're from and who's in your family. And then we'll get back to present day here in a bit.
Yeah. So this is great. I actually just finished a paper this week. I'm in grad school getting my master's in clinical mental health. And so I just did, a genogram assignment. So I really just mapped out my whole family. So we deep dove into all the things, all the patterns and family life cycles. It was great. So I'm originally from Kansas. That's where my husband and I actually met. So we're both from Kansas. And I have a lot of family from Texas, actually, because my grandma was born here, but ended up moving to Kansas with my mom when she was, I think, maybe 3 or 4, somewhere around there. And she grew roots there. And so that's where we ended up. So I've got my mom, Stacy, my dad, Mike, and I've got 2 brothers. So I'm the middle child, but I'm the only girl.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the middle child things, I don't really feel a lot of those because I was the only girl. So I think it was just different for me.
Yeah. And so when you were growing up as the only girl, did you feel like you had more in common with one of your parents? Or was it like you're a mix of both?
I mean, I think so. If I think about my personality, I'm definitely a mix of my mom and my dad. On the outside, I think most people would say, you're just like your mom. We've got the same mannerisms. We look similar. Gotcha. We've got the outgoing thing, the stronger personality. We've got big opinions, all of that. But it's funny because it's almost like if I look at myself on the inside, I see a lot of my dad. So on the outside, people wouldn't notice it, but I see a lot of my dad. My dad's more meek, mild, soft-spoken, and maybe it's just the older I get too. But I think as a child, I always saw myself as my mom because that's what people are telling you, and I had the outgoing thing, especially compared to my brothers who were not nearly as outgoing. My little brother came into it, but.
And when you think about that, were there things that you can remember about yourself as a kid that you didn't have in common with either one of them?
I think maybe as a kid, I only saw myself through my parents. So I don't think I saw a lot of uniqueness. Now looking back, I can see those things. But if I place myself as a child and thinking about who I was then, I really, I mean, I think it was just because me and my mom look so much alike and were outgoing. There was
Yeah.
just, that was like always spoken out loud. You're just like your mom, or you're just like your grandma. We all look so similar in crowds and that kind of thing. We're perceived similar. So I think as a kid, I didn't really maybe notice too much.
Yeah, and that's one thing that people say is that, like, as a kid, we're operating in more polarities. So it's like
Yeah.
you have to pick a side. It's this or that. There's not a lot of and, like mom
Yeah.
and dad. So like I like how you're saying of I was as a kid this, but now looking back, and that's really what I think helps us as we process through our story. So with that as a little bit of a backdrop, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
This is funny because I actually wanted to be what my dad is. So my
Okay.
dad's an architect.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like every time you get asked that all the time in elementary school. And the one that always stuck with me is, I want to be an architect like my dad, which like is kind of random. I think a lot of kids probably wouldn't think they want to be an architect. Most people thought my dad was a contractor. And I was always the kid that's like, he's not a contractor. He designs the buildings. He doesn't build them. And so I felt really passionate about that. I think I liked the creative side. And I mean, he decided he wanted to be an architect when he was like in middle school or something like
Wow.
that, like super
Yeah.
young. So
Okay.
I think that like attracted me of there's just a path and you just go and this is what it is. But
Yeah.
then I ended up taking a CAD class in middle school and decided that was not for me.
What do you think was one of the best memories in your childhood? So you're kind of processing yourself with your family, and you have a lot like your mom, but then your career is kind of like your dad. What does that little girl remember?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately and thinking about, where all of my best memories were. And it's funny because I know we're thinking me as a little girl, but even now when I have dreams, I have lots of dreams. I don't, I'm just like one of those people that just wakes up and remembers their dreams. And almost every dream from my childhood is at my grandparents' house. And it's a house that we spent a lot of time there. My
Okay.
mom owned a daycare. So anytime we were sick, or my grandma lived across the street from our elementary school. So we were there so much. And I just
Mm,
remember it feeling like such a safe space. And it was
mm,
just like a space I just wanted to go to all the
mm.
time. And so
Yeah.
it's funny, I can't think of one specific memory. I think if I probably sat here long enough, I could think of some, of course, but I think that was like a safe space.
We talk about it in, like, one of the best, because otherwise your brain can be spinning on, like, I gotta lay out
Yeah.
all of the best ones, and then I need to pick one. So,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's an interesting point, though, is that sometimes it's not an actual memory of, like, a one-time thing. It is
Mhm.
more of an aspect of your childhood. I think if we could dig a little bit deeper, though, like, if we looked at a significant experience that you had as a child, and this could be negative or positive, looking at maybe it's not a memory, but just something that happened during your childhood years that significantly influenced who you were as a teen and who you are now.
I don't know why this memory is coming to my head because it doesn't, I don't know, in the moment, it doesn't feel very significant, but maybe there's something more here that that I haven't thought about. But I
Mhm.
remember, one time my dad my dad, he owns his own business now. So for all of like middle school, high school, he worked in our house, but elementary school and before he worked at a firm. And I remember one time he came home and it was like a random weeknight. And he came home and he was, we always ran to the back door and greeted him. And I can still picture that whole space.
Yeah.
You know, we had this little hallway. And I remember I ran to him and we were saying hi and giving him hugs. And he got down on his knees and he said, "Hey, I actually bought you something today. I just saw it and thought of you." And it was a little picture frame. And it was like, it had purple flowers all around it. And it said
Mhm.
princess up at the
Oh,
top.
wow.
And that was like, it's funny that that's the first thing that popped up because I've thought about this
Yeah.
before. Like, I just remember in that moment thinking, like, my dad thought of me, like,
Yeah.
saw this and then thought of me. And it's just one of those little tiny things that, like, really stuck with me. So I'm sure that, of course, did something to my
Mhm.
heart, my confidence. But I
Yeah.
never really connected those things before. But
Mhm.
that's like the memory that keeps popping up in my head.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's really special. I think it'd be cool for you to tell him too at some point
Yeah, I
if you haven't
know.
reminisced on that one in particular. That's like a sweet memory, and for some of us, there were more emotional times, and you talked about yourself as, like, a strong personality. So, were there ever times where things were challenging and you had to figure out a way to cope with something in your reality, either at school or at home? And if so, what did you do? Like, what were some of the things you did as a child to cope?
I mean, I think probably the biggest, thing that or the first thing probably that I really
Mhm.
had to learn to cope with was my grandma passing away.
Oh,
So, yeah,
wow. I'm
it's
sorry.
kind of one of those. Yeah, thank you. It's one of those things where I think I was only 7. I was about 7.
My goodness.
Yeah, I was 7 years
That
old when she passed away. She was super young. So my
and
dad
this is the
actually
grandma that you just talked about a few moments ago?
a different grandma.
Different grandma, okay.
Yeah, yeah, this is the other one. This was my
Mm,
dad's mom,
yeah, and where did
and
she live?
so she was in Florida. Well,
Okay.
they were in Kansas City for a lot of years, but
Yeah,
when she passed, they were in
yeah,
Florida. So
okay.
this was, like, really
Mm,
monumental.
yeah,
We had just been to Florida visiting them. We went every summer, spent a whole week with them. Then me and my brother, spent the whole next week traveling back from Florida to Kansas in her camper, her and my grandpa. And so, I mean, we made some of, like, the best memories. She taught me how to French braid my hair, how to do a handstand in the water. We saw a real life alligator. It's like all these, like, sticky memories that you have.
so cool, yeah.
Yeah, so we got this really special time, and we had just gone back to Kansas. They'd stayed for a couple days, and one night, middle of the night, she got a blood clot in her
Hmm,
leg. They went, they rushed her to the hospital, and she had passed before she even got to the hospital. She was only 52,
yeah,
which at the time when I was 7, that felt really old.
yeah,
And now my
sure.
dad just turned 52 2
Oh
years
my
ago.
goodness.
So it's like
Yeah,
opening another layer of all that.
sure.
But I remember sitting on my parents' bed the
Yeah,
next day with my mom and my dad, my brother and my grandpa, and they told us what had happened, and I just remember sitting there, like, I remember my papa crying, and
mhm.
after that, like, I just don't really remember. I just remember sitting there. It felt like it was just me
Yeah,
with these, like, emotions for the first time. Like,
mhm.
I never really sat with anything that intense before.
Yeah,
And I remember just sitting on the bed thinking, like, "Is this real? Like,
yeah,
no way." Just kind of in shock. And I mean, everybody was in shock. No, she was so healthy. I mean, like I said, we just went
yeah.
hiking,
Handstands in the
handstands in the water, like in
yeah.
the ocean, not even a
Oh,
pool. Like there were
oh
waves.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
Like
Yeah,
she
wow.
was super, super healthy. And so it was just like this shocking
Mm,
moment. And I remember, I think I'm not sure if I knew what I was doing. Not sure I knew that I was coping, but I think it was, I mean, I remember moments after that of just trying to actualize that loss, you know? So I remember at her funeral, I remember seeing her in the casket. I remember what she looked like. I remember what she felt like. And I remember, you know, walking around the funeral home with my best friend at the time. And
Mm.
I was glad that she was there with me because we were able to just laugh and play and have fun still. And I think
Yeah.
that's what kids do, you know? That's how we
Sure.
learn is is through play. And so, I mean, I think for me that coping experience was
Mhm.
that. It was
Yeah.
just, okay, this happened. Now let's just keep moving forward, you know? And I remember later on in life definitely opening up more of that grieving process and processing that, but we can keep
Yeah.
talking about that as we get to those stages,
Oh,
but
as much as you're willing to share, I think
yeah.
that's a significant one, and I just had a curious moment of, like, if you now at your age could talk and say something encouraging to your 7-year-old grieving self, what would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know why this is making me more emotional too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would take time to like binge down and give her a hug.
Okay. That's sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can't imagine grieving in that way and trying to parent
Yeah.
through that moment.
Hmm.
I try and put myself in my parents' shoes. And when you become a parent, you do that. You don't know any of that until you have your own child that
Mhm.
you're trying to manage and love and
Yeah.
shape. And I think my parents were just in such shock
Yeah.
that we were all going through this
Mhm.
together. And and I think that moment for me just felt so significant and like shattering in a way, even though on the outside probably no one would have noticed. I think that's how I spent a lot of my childhood and adolescent years is on the outside. It's this positive, outgoing, confident. That was something that was always spoken over me. You're so confident. You're so confident. And I think I just needed people to slow down and like really look deeper. And so I think in that moment, if I would take myself and go back, I would just take a moment to do that, to say, like, I see that you're sad and that's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay to be sad, you know? It's okay to have those emotions.
It's so simple, a hug, and it's okay to be sad, but, this even as adults, like, we don't give ourselves space
Yeah.
to do that, to just
Yeah.
get a hug or ask for a hug. I know
Yeah.
as a kid, I didn't know that I was allowed to ask for a hug.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
"Can I have a hug?"
Not at all.
And so that's
Yeah.
something that I've tried to tell the kids. I'm like, "Hey, if you need a hug, you can ask me. You can ask me for a hug." Or sometimes I'll be if they're sad, I'll say, "Hey, do you need a hug?" And they're like, think
Yeah.
about it. They're crying or thinking about it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, well, I'm available. I'm sure your mom would be willing to." Yeah. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, again, you said you were willing to talk about it a little bit more, and that's what kinda popped into my mind. You kinda, like, gave us a little bit of a you said, like, even in your teenage and adolescence, like, could we go there and just talk a little bit about that transition and how you moved into that next season of life?
Elementary school was fun. I was kinda one of those kids that always loved school. I
Okay.
always thought it was really fun. I was like teacher's pet, you know? Never wanted to be in trouble,
Yeah.
ever. And, you know, as an adult, of course, that kinda turns into the people pleaser thing a little bit.
It can,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it definitely did in a lot of ways, but, you know, going into middle school. Middle school's a blur. Middle school's
Really?
weird.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember things, of course,
Okay.
but I think I just that message always of, "You're so confident. You have so
Mhm.
much confidence,"
Yeah.
was always spoken over me, and I think it
Mhm.
was done out of love.
Yeah. Did you take it as a compliment in the moment?
I think I did until I didn't. I think for a while, I saw that as, like, "Thank you for pulling out or seeing something in me." But then, of course, in middle school, it's like not of course, I guess, but for me, I know this isn't true for everybody, but it's a typical feeling, of just that feeling of, "Who am I?" Like, I'm trying to become something, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out new tools for a whole new season of life that you've
Yeah.
never done before, which, I mean, isn't that true of every season? But you've got so much happening in middle
Mhm.
school and in that
Yeah.
season. And I remember, I mean, that was like the first time that a boy ever noticed me.
Did middle school start at 6th grade for you guys
Yeah.
over there?
So
Okay.
yeah, we had a separate 6th grade center. So
Okay.
it was like all the 6th graders. So that one was like an easier transition.
So the boy liking you, was that in 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th
That,
grade?
that was more 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
more 7th and 8th grade. I mean, because I remember, like, I just actually went back to my hometown last week and,
Mm.
like,
Oh,
drove back to
wow.
my old house
So
and
this is
passed
fresh now.
the middle school. It's really fresh. It
Yeah.
was bringing back all the memories. I
Mm.
was like, "Oh, man." You just forget until you go
Mhm.
back to that space. But, yeah, I mean, I remember that was always something that was circling in my head at that time is, what do people think about me? How am I being perceived? Just all those thoughts, and so I think that just, like, weighed on me so much. I just cared so much what everybody was thinking about me at all times, and then you start thinking about all the cliques and, will I be a cheerleader? Will I that was a big deal in middle
Sure.
school.
Oh,
I actually
yeah.
tried out for the cheer team, didn't make it. That was, like, such a loss for me. Me and Jordan always
Yeah.
joke because he tried out for the basketball team in middle school and didn't
Mhm.
make it, and
Oh,
we would
wow.
talk about it all the time. Like, that was, like, devastating when we were that age, which we laugh
Sure.
now because 'cause we're like,
Yeah.
"That feels so far from who we are," and who we've become. But
Those things are huge, though, at the time. I think
yeah,
that's the good point that you're making, is that,
yeah,
we might have crushes in elementary age, but in that
yeah,
middle school, bodies are starting to change. Hormones are starting to get pumped into our bodies, and then there's that somebody paying attention and then wondering, what am I paying attention to? And, um, the identity, it feels like a moving target because, as much as is happening in the body, like, that's the tip of the iceberg of what's happening in the mind and the brain.
yeah,
So yeah,
100%.
I love your perspective on that. I think it's helpful for just people
Yeah.
to think about that. And as you're developing all of these, like, opinions, and you're asking these questions, do you feel like you were just asking all of these questions, or do you feel like you were taking time to answer, like, who am I? I am this, or was it more of like there was just this perpetual series of questions and you didn't really let yourself answer them?
I love that question. I don't think I've really thought about it that way before, but thinking back, I was 100% asking the questions and then letting everybody around me answer them for
Okay.
me.
It was more like a poll trying to see
Yeah. Oh,
what
definitely.
you would guess people were thinking about you.
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, and taking even tidbits of, this person said this, or this is what I perceived someone thought of me. And it's almost like I was just like filling this backpack full of all of that, and I was just like carrying the weight of all of that.
Hmm.
And I never thought about it, but I think I've thought about that from high school, and I
Yeah.
never thought that middle school is probably where that really started. Like that learned behavior of, I want to know all of this. Like I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about all of this a lot because my mind is just constantly
Yeah.
going and thinking and trying to perceive things that are not just on the surface. And so I think I was doing that with myself, putting these questions out there and then taking whatever I felt like was presented in front of me, good and bad. I didn't know how
Yeah.
to throw the bad out because it's not
Yeah.
all bad.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think even in what you said about how people said that you were strong and like these positive things about you that were compliments, but they almost could feel boxing in or something. It's like until it wasn't. Like when you said until it wasn't, it was like you what if you didn't want to be strong for a day or an hour or a moment? Because in childhood, like we said, our minds can think very binary. Is it this or that? Through puberty, our brains are also changing. So that's when we develop continuums. And it starts this or that, starts going from this, all of this in the middle, and then all of that. So I think you're experiencing this spread out and you're like, "Okay, I am strong. I'm gonna give it to myself, but I'm also something else over here. Like, what is that?" So that's my question,
Yeah.
is on your views and opinions and ideas and stuff like that. You were polling people, but did you allow yourself to acknowledge your own personal opinions, things that you felt passionate or deeply or strongly about?
I do remember feeling confident in school and proud of myself
Yeah,
for grades or being a friend to someone who doesn't have a friend
yeah,
or
mhm,
things like that. So I think there were moments and pockets
yeah,
of that.
yeah, those glimpses of your strengths and those values emerging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like they're there, but it's almost like I just kind of over the next few years let the voices kind of like put mine down here a little bit more and the other voices up here.
So then what kind of goals I mean, did you keep on holding on to the architect idea? Or, you said cheerleader, like, what if we would have asked adolescent you what you wanted to be when you grew up, like, did you have an answer to that, or did it feel kind of like, "I'll figure it out"?
Yeah, definitely a to be determined. I remember feeling stressed from that question so much because I think elementary school, I saw this picture of my dad, which it's funny because my mom changed her career way later in life. But I just had this picture of my dad. He knew he wanted to be an architect since he was 12. Then he did it. Like he never changed his mind. He did it this whole time. And I remember, seventh grade is when I took the CAD class. For any of that want to look it up again, I took that CAD class and decided absolutely not. Like that is not what I want to do. And I remember thinking in that class, I don't want to sit at a computer and not be able to talk to people. I do not want to do anything like
Wow.
that.
Yes.
And so, at the time, I had no idea that that would turn into ministry, counseling. No
Yeah,
idea. That was
sure.
like not really even on the table,
Mm,
But it's funny because my mom's in ministry now, but she wasn't back
yeah,
then. None of my family
okay.
was. And
Yeah,
so, we were involved at our church. I always served and did
mhm,
that kind of thing, but never really saw any of that as like a career option. And so I remember
yeah,
feeling stressed about that question.
okay.
Like, what are your talents? What are your hobbies? Like, I had nothing. I played tennis in high school because my mom made me choose a sport.
Yeah,
As I said, tennis will be fine. I was not really good at it. I was like,
yeah,
fine. If I could play doubles, sometimes we could win because my partner could do enough. And yeah, I remember like so many kids at church had musical hobbies and things like that. But I just never, like, the only thing I felt like I was good at is like making friends.
Mhm.
But it's like, but as a,
Did
like,
that
that's not
feel
a
like
career.
a lesser talent?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, at the moment, now I see it as like, that's one
Yeah.
of the greatest gifts the Lord has given me. You know, I love that. And I love getting to do that. And I see that
Mm.
you can make careers out of some of those skills. But at the
Yeah.
time, no,
Sure.
I never, I mean, yeah, it felt like a burden almost. Like,
Hmm.
I just don't have anything. I don't have anything to offer. And so I always remember feeling this like level of stress thinking about
Hmm.
that kind of question.
Okay. Those were all the things that were on your mind and heart in 8th grade. And so then going to high school and the transition to like college years and stuff, I think it'd be interesting. You kind of alluded to knowing Jordan for a while. At what point did Jordan come to the picture?
I mean, we probably knew each other in middle school because we went to the same camps, maybe even elementary school, but we don't remember each other. So I don't
Yeah.
really count that. But we
You
did
don't
go
have
to
to
the
count
same camps. Yeah,
it. Okay.
exactly. But in our freshman year, that's when we really became friends. So two of our best friends were kind of liking each other. So we would go and we would hang out,
Yeah.
and it was
Be the
totally like,
chaperones.
yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I was like, oh, Jordan is awesome.
Yeah.
Jordan, he might disagree with this, but in
Okay.
my head, Jordan had no idea. Like, he was not thinking about me. He didn't think I was cute. It was none of that. Like, he
Wow.
was thinking guitar, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. He'd
which
moved on
which
from
he
basketball at this point.
yeah, he had moved on. He'd really settled into the musician thing, which has
Mhm.
worked out well for him. It was
Yeah.
great for him. Yeah, so we met. So I mean, either way, we became friends freshman year. And then our friends, broke up. They weren't together for very long, but we always would hang out at camps and things like that. We went to separate churches, but we stayed friends. We would text each other all the time. He's like, Jordan, he's the funniest, most witty person. So every time he would text me, I'd be like, I'm not funny. I don't know what to say. So I always remember feeling like that with him. Yeah. So we became friends in freshman year, but it wasn't till I went to his church my summer after my junior year. So
To
that's when I
visit, or you
switched.
started attending there?
I started attending there. So I switched from the youth group I was in and moved over to that youth group. It was just me and the youth pastor had gotten to be friends from camps and that kind of thing. And then it just kind of happened to where more of my friends started to be in that youth group. And so I ended up staying over there. And I mean, hindsight, maybe it was because of Jordan. There's probably a little bit of that. So then freshman or senior year is when we started officially dating. So we were barely high school sweethearts, but he was there. He was always there throughout high school, but really the middle of that, we weren't as good of friends. We kind of had gone separate ways a little bit.
Is there anything else that you would wanna share about high school then? About yourself that would help us understand you?
High school was probably the season that I was the least, like, if I would reflect back on all the seasons and ages of my life, I think that end of freshman year to end of junior year were the years that I was the least like myself. I felt like all those pressures and voices that I had listened to my whole life, I was just
Yeah.
running from them
Hmm.
and spent so much time looking for my identity and truth in
Yeah.
other spaces.
Hmm.
And I mean, I remember I did so much stupid stuff. And I mean, I remember my parents, they always found out, as parents do, I guess. And I was like, I remember hating it. I hated that they would find out, but then I would be so glad that they found out because it's like I didn't want to do any of it. And I didn't know that until that junior and senior year,
Yeah.
when I just kept thinking, like, as soon as high school's over, I can just forget all of it. I don't have to do any of this,
Hmm.
which is a weird thought
A
to come
strong
back
thought.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because you would think, well, if you don't want to do it, you could just stop. But I just felt so consumed and surrounded by the voices
Hmm.
around me. I mean, I remember being in trouble a lot.
At school or just once you got home?
No, never at school. Never at
Okay.
school.
Yeah.
I could hide I would run away from class, like I would go gym class, and the security officer would just wave at me and tell me bye because they're like, "Oh, Meagan would never do anything bad."
Yeah.
Wild, wild stuff. No, but at
Mm,
home, I that's the feeling that I
okay.
felt, which I think is was just guilt because I knew I was
Mhm.
living this life that I didn't want to be. And I remember my dad looking at me. I was in a really bad relationship, and I remember one time he looked me in the eyes and he just said, he almost had tears. Like he wasn't crying, but he was really close. He said, "Meagan, this is not who you are." And that like spoke so loud to my heart and to my mind. And I mean, it was probably a good 6 months. I remember in the moment, like feeling it, like I felt it. But on the outside, I was like, okay, like kind of the eye roll, like, you don't know me. I could not get that voice out of my head. And I remember it was
The
probably
one
about
from
6
him
months.
or some of the peripheral ones?
No, my dad. Yeah, that
Okay.
voice, that
Hmm.
just him looking at me saying, "This is not who you are." I think it was just this moment of like clicking an outside voice with
Mhm.
like what my voice was saying, and it just became like, yeah, that's true. And I remember it's probably about 6 months later, and I like cut everything off with the boy that I was with. I remember like sitting in my room just praying and
Hmm.
just asking the Lord to help me. That was like a thing I was running from too.
Yeah.
And just like this huge shift in a moment in my heart. And just everything felt like it was like lining back up.
Hmm.
And I had just decided to where I was going to go to college. And I thought, okay, this is it. We're starting over. Like this was around November, December of my senior year. And it felt right. It felt good. And then Jordan asked me on a date, I think in February. No, yeah, February. And I was like, what the heck? I'm not supposed to date anybody. I'm going to college. But then I thought, it's Jordan Combs. I have to. And
Yeah, his
Jordan
name sounds
just,
famous.
I know. Jordan Combs was famous in my mind. Like in my life, he really
Yeah.
was. I think it was, he was this picture of like the life that I wanted. And I'm just, I'm really thankful for him because he's never taken that and used that against me or used it like he's never placed himself as an idol in my life or any of that. And I think dating him was fun and it was easy. And I did not know it in the moment, but he helped me find a picture of love and of Jesus again that I just kind of had lost. So I was thankful for him. Still am.
And
Yeah.
at what point did the psychology or the mental health side of things emerge?
I really wanted to go to a private Christian school. I think that's probably what I knew. They were the ones coming to promote, like, those are the schools coming to be promoted at our camps and things like that. And so I actually chose that school on purpose because I knew they had more vocational type degrees rather than just ministry type degrees. And so Jordan had already chosen SAGU, which is in Texas. if anyone's not from here listening. So we did long distance that whole time, but we both
Oh,
knew,
wow.
like, we were so confident. We
Yeah.
love each other, but we know this is what we want to do. So I went
Hmm.
to Evangel I was like undecided, undeclared, no idea what I
Okay.
wanted to do.
Wow.
So still, and as a senior, you just get that question so much.
Yes.
So I remember that still feeling like this stressful question. I remember just thinking like, please just no one ask me today. Like, I don't want to deal with it. Um, and so, I think I got a year of my prereqs done. And I really I just remember thinking, I like people, and psychology is like the study of people. Like, I think, like in my head, I didn't know. Like, this was a thought that I had. Like, I think
Yeah.
psychology has a lot to do with people,
Yeah.
which turns out it does.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it was kind of like, I think so. Let's just try that. And started taking, I think obviously, I'm sure my first class was like intro to psychology, and just loved it. I mean, just the research side, the application side, just all of these things, just really started to enjoy it. Um, and then my senior year, well, I graduated in 3.5 years. So
Okay.
kind of my junior, kind of my senior year.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like this excitement for ministry. And I was like, maybe there's a world where I could mix these two. And
Yeah.
again, I really just like didn't have a lot of experience or like people that I knew that were doing anything in this world. I had professors that definitely helped coach me through a lot of things, but just felt excited about ministry too. And watching my mom do that, and she had found such passion in
Yeah.
that and excitement in that. So I added a church leadership and
Oh, wow.
biblical studies minor, like
Yeah.
my last semester. Like I busted it out. So I was like, I need something. And then graduated and was like, I do not want to go back to school. I am not doing grad school. um, Moved to Texas with Jordan, and just again, like, I moved here without a job, no idea what I was going to do, just kind of living on love. I don't know. It's probably a better way to say that.
Sounds like
But
a good country song.
I know it does, right? No, we had some roots and things like that, but ended up
Mm.
moving here. I started working at SAGU, so I said, all right, I'll do some grad school. Why not? And started because they were paying for it. And so I started some classes and just like was not excited about it. It's like I had just lost this spark.
Yeah.
Um, and and there was then a potential to work at our church, and I was really excited about
Yeah.
that and about the opportunity there. And so took that, stopped school when I wasn't working at SAGU anymore, and did that for 5 years
Wow.
and loved it. I mean, I think looking back now, I didn't know it at the time, but I think it helped me find so much of who I am
Mhm.
and develop a lot of those things,
Yeah.
and gave me a heart for the church and for the body of Christ and things like that.
Mhm.
And helped give me contacts and experience with people and serving them and meeting a lot of different people. And then it was kind of sudden, but just felt the spark again about counseling and an excitement there,
Yeah.
and decided to quit my job and pursue school. And so now that's kind of where I'm at now.
We heard your story. Yeah, your
Mhm.
childhood and adolescence and kinda how you got there, but what do you know about yourself now?
I have some thoughts.
Okay.
I think probably it's especially in light of just reflecting on all these past seasons of who I've been, and now thinking who I've become. It's almost like this connection back to that confident
Mm.
girl. And
Yeah.
I think the confidence that I was searching for in so many spaces was the approval
Yeah.
of others. Like I will feel confident
Mhm.
if others see these things
Yeah.
in me. And now I sit here, and of course, that's still a thought. Those are
Sure.
thoughts still. Like, I think everybody can have those at times. But I think in like the most refreshing and peaceful way,
Mm.
I see this confidence again, but just in being me.
Mhm.
And I can bring these things to the table, and it maybe is cool for some people, and maybe it's not for other
Yeah.
people. And like, that's okay. Like, that's
Mhm.
really okay. And it's like so refreshing. And I mean, I think just even those adult years, my first career years, those first 5 or 6 years, I think I spent so much time trying to figure out, do I climb this ladder or
Yeah.
do I not want to climb this ladder? And feeling this push, like it, like emotionally feeling this, sometimes even like verbally feeling this push of like,
Mhm.
you're so good, you need to do this. You're so good, you need
Yeah.
to do this. And you need to climb up and you need to do this. And the strongest leader is the loudest leader. And,
Mhm.
you have to be here. You have to be here to be successful. And I remember a specific time where there was this opportunity presented to be a boss of a department.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there with myself and with the Lord and just thinking, like, what do I want? Like, and what do you want? And just
Mm.
feeling this, like, the most freeing thought that I probably had felt in my whole life of like, I don't, I don't have to do that. Like, I think I could lead and be this like truest version of myself in a space where like maybe no one but one person will hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
And maybe that one person is me or maybe it's Jordan. you know and and I just remember how freeing that felt, and it just began this journey for me of figuring that out now. Like,
Mhm.
who am I outside of all
Yeah.
of these things? And so it's like this confidence again now that like I can I can move and make choices that might not ever make sense to the person next to me. And like, that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to. As long as I'm serving my family well and loving people, then like that's okay. And that's like a very this is still it still feels new to
Yeah.
me
Sure. Mhm.
to walk in that.
When you first tried to get your master's, and I don't mean like you tried and failed, you used
Yeah.
that same
Yeah.
analogy of like the spark wasn't there, and then
Yeah.
you found the spark again. Can you tell me, like, why you think you chose that or why the spark, that analogy or that language was it's pretty interesting.
There was a lot of fear surrounding being a counselor back then, and a lot of, what do I have to offer? And which is funny, I very much still feel that. um, but I feel a lot more confident in the unknowing now. And whereas before that unknowing and that fear and it was like, I don't I don't know how to step into this space. I don't know how to hold that space. And feeling like I'm too, like a thought I had is I'm too emotional to
Mm.
hold that space. Like, I won't be okay to hold
Yeah.
that space. And I don't know, maybe some of that's real. Maybe it's just all fear, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think finding that freedom of no one's perfect at anything except for like maybe Jesus. But like no one here is perfect at anything. We're all learning. We're
Yeah.
all growing, and we're all just finding these spaces together. And of course, there are skill sets that we have and things that we can bring to the table that are valuable, and things that other people may not have. And those people have skill sets that you don't have. And I never saw that as like a beautiful thing before. But I
Mm.
think now I see that as like the most beautiful thing is that we get to enter in these spaces with each other and and do that with and help each other and find connection in that
Yeah.
way. And so I think I just this freedom that I found in who I wanted to become and how to make these choices on my own helped spark that again. It's like I didn't have this space in my head or in my heart to even know that I could make that choice again. And it's like all this space freed up. And then it was like, wait, this is what I want to do. Like, this is who I'm created to be.
I remember having a conversation with you when you lost the spark. And
Yeah.
then I had another phone call with you when you
Yeah.
found the spark again. And I told you every time that I don't talk people into mental health.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
once you tell me
100%.
you're called, I'm going to encourage you.
Yeah.
Once you tell me that this is what you want to do, that this is what you feel like you want to do, I want to help. I want to
Yeah.
support. When I met you, I just felt like there's a gift here. There's
Mm,
something here that could be utilized in multiple spaces. And that's why I
mm.
was very cautious. I'm like, because I don't want to push you. You could use it in the mental health space if you want to. And there's pros
Yeah.
and cons to that. And but
Yeah.
you could also use it in a context like you said, like in ministry. I don't think that you were devaluing or misusing what it is that you have.
Yeah.
And as you described yourself and as you described where you are now, you used that word confident and you used it not as a label, but as
Mm,
a descriptor
mm. Yeah.
for who and where you are. It's like that. That's just really cool.
I'm like internalizing and processing these things
Yeah.
that you're even reflecting on. And it's, it's like you kind of forget sometimes those voices, but I've thought about like your voice in both of those loss of spark and the re-entering of the spark. And and yeah, it's like just even hearing that encouragement from you, I can see there's like this difference of not using that as like this box or this label that I have to be this, you know? But now I can hear those things and say, what a gift. Like, what a gift to have a friend see these things that maybe I can't see and to find a confidence in that, but not as a limiting thing. I mean, I hope that like that's a space that a lot of people can find themselves in, just
Yeah.
that freedom to be who you are.
And that's a key thing, as I am processing your story is just these mile markers of going from like one of your key memories being your dad bringing you this thing that says you're my princess.
Yeah.
And like again, not that that boxes you in because you're not boxed into the word, it's a frame. It's one of the descriptors of identity
Hmm.
there in that gift. Then fast forward to your high school years, now he's saying that you're not living in alignment with who he knows you are. And
Yeah.
you said you already knew that.
Yeah.
He was just pointing it out.
Yeah.
And even
Mm,
though there was eye roll, eventually, I think that there's another point here where there's this other man that comes in your life, and
mm,
he gives you space and freedom to figure out who you are.
mhm.
And then you end up here.
Yeah.
So these are just points that stick out in my head. And I'm
Mm,
just thinking about, like, I'm still stuck on the spark because that's not something that we can do
mm.
as the people that you poll, the people that you might want to please. Like,
Yeah.
we can't ignite you, but we can put wood on the fire. We can add
Mm,
another log there and just encourage you and back you up, but it's not our place. We could overstep and say, "No, you know what? You're running from the counseling call and you better go get your degree and you're going to regret it someday if you don't start." And I remember telling you that. I'm
yeah.
like, a lot of people are going to tell you that if you don't get your master's now, then you'll never
Mm.
get it.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I'm calling that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not it. Because I'm
Yeah.
telling you,
I remember that.
if you don't want to jump back into it, then it was not for you. Then you were doing it for the wrong reasons. But if you're supposed to go back, then you won't be able to let it go.
Yeah.
It will burn inside you to the point that it won't let you rest until you sign up for classes again. I don't know, or whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's a beautiful picture of that. And Megan, I know that there's even now of just knowing your story, because again, we said we were going to get back to the present day, and there's kids and parenting and all this journey, and so I would love to just kind of wrap it up here, and then have, because I want to be respectful of your time, but maybe have you back and tell me, if you're willing, tell me a little bit more, not only just about your family life and what you've learned from parenting and being a mom, and then the integration. I think that there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out, how do I find this freedom, but then there's all these expectations, there's all this other stuff with being a mom and then having a career and still in the midst of that. I think that there's a lot of other insights that you have to share. But one more question, if you would allow me, it's that reflection question of, like, if
Mm.
there was a point of any version, so childhood, adolescence, any previous point, it could even be in this conversation. So anytime before now that you could go back to and you could say something encouraging, empowering to yourself, what would you say? What point would you go back to and what would you say?
I think I would go back to high school me, freshman year, if I have to pinpoint it. And I think I would want to say, your confidence comes from within. Let your voice and who you are from the inside out be what sparks your movement. And for me, part of that inside is the Lord's voice. You
Mhm.
know, that's
Yeah.
that's part of who
Sure.
I am. That inside it's me and it's the Lord. And yeah, I think I would just want to tell her that. Listen to that. Let that voice be the loudest voice. Yeah.
I love how you worked the spark word in there. That's just, obviously you saw I was digging that one. So I think that's
Confidence
cool.
is found.
I love it. Those are key words.
I know. I did not think that's what I was going to pull out today, but
That's the cool thing about being able and willing to jump on here and not know the questions that I'm going to ask you and just roll with it. Megan, you did awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you. We're going to stay tuned and cheer you on your journey. Super pumped for you. Tell Jordan I said hi.
I will. I'll tell him. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow.